Hello, I'm Mark Hjerpe, VP of Global Revenue at Intento, and I'm pleased to welcome you to Intento's webinar, GPT and Localization, When the Tide Goes Out. For those of you that don't know Intento well, we're an AI innovation partner to the global enterprise. Through the Intento Enterprise MT Hub, we help the world's leading companies successfully navigate the ever-expanding machine translation landscape, evaluating, onboarding, augmenting, and maintaining best fit machine translation. And just as significantly, we're educators and collaborators to the global business community. Change is hard, and I know that, though exciting, most of us are challenged by the lightning pace of advancement in localization AI. Does the tremendous amount of work that went into the creation of world-class MT programs in the past few years seem in retrospect like a false summit with GPT still towering in the distance to be scaled? Lots of work to be done, and we strive to always provide fresh, valuable insight. Intento's State of MT report is soon to release its 7th annual edition, and Intento MT University, launched earlier this year, already has thousands of users for our free courses on all things machine translation. The impetus for this webinar was the fact that soon after ChatGPT took the world by storm, a similar wave of excitement around GPT and localization grew and grew to the point that a level set is now needed to separate the buzz from the value. Since 2020, when Intento was one of the very early users of GPT-3, we've been exploring GPT's transformative effects on localization workflows. Our goal today is to offer real-world experiences and impartial guidance to help you navigate all the exciting new potential that GPT can bring to your own localization and machine translation use cases. We're honored to have many of our customers and industry peers presenting with us, including Disney+, Expedia, GoTo, Government of Canada, Şişecam, Trendyol, and VMware. They have a wealth of machine translation and GPT experience, and we're so thankful that they're here to share their expertise with us today. Today's program starts with a keynote presentation by Konstantin Savenkov, Intento's co-founder and CEO, followed by our first panel discussion on real-world use cases and results of GPT and localization workflows. This will be followed by a short session on the history of large language models, and our second panel will cover how to get started with GPT and localization, tips and best practices to follow, and challenges to be aware of. Finally, just a bit of housekeeping. Attendees, please submit your questions during the various presentations, and they'll be answered at the end of each session. With that, we're ready to kick things off. Konstantin, please join me on stage.
Hi, Mark. Thank you. I think MT is not a false summit. It's like a base camp.
Okay. So let me just
one of my favorite.
Yep, I'm just going to give a quick intro to you, Konstantin, to tell people a little bit about who you are before you jump in. So Konstantin is the CEO and co-founder of Intento. He has a PhD in computer science and worked in academia and served as on a number of executive roles before co-founding Intento in 2016 at the Berkeley Skydeck Accelerator. A lot has happened since those early days at Berkeley, with Intento now approaching 100 employees around the globe, serving the world's largest companies, organizations, and governments. With that, Konstantin, the floor is yours for today's keynote presentation.
Thank you, Mark. You know, one of my favorite books is called Ramdoodle. It's about going to False Summit. So I prefer to think MT as a base camp, and from this base camp we can reach new heights. Hello, thank you again for coming today to our webinar. In my talk, I want to set the stage for these two exciting panel discussions, and I will talk about the changes new technology brings to our industry. You know, when people discuss changes the new tech brings to the labor-intensive markets, they often draw this example of spreadsheets. Like tools like Microsoft Excel replace calculators and enable people to switch from doing arithmetics to higher-level tasks. And some people probably were hurt, for example, people who just loved the process of multiplying numbers, or did it perfectly in their mind, all their skills become less needed. But others felt empowered to do data analysis, financial modeling, project management, decision-making, or just running a small business, which was super hard before spreadsheets. It's a well-known story, but it needs a name. I would call it zooming out. That's what happened to those professionals. They didn't just get more productive. They didn't just pivot to do something else. With the spreadsheets, they could zoom out and focus on more critical business tasks, bringing more value. And zooming out is the best approach to new technology. You have more time on the more important stuff, but keep the original task in your scope, as it costs you close to nothing thanks to automation. It gives you an upper hand in any competition, be it a business competition or an internal competition. And the emergence of large language models is a perfect case for applying this zooming out technique. It will affect many, but the language professionals can zoom out. And at a previous Intento webinar in December, I discussed that with this vast number of different automatic translation use cases across enterprise, it's now more than just machine translation is needed for this automation. Machine translation is no longer a single pillar of this advanced automation in localization. We now have three more: source quality improvement, making text more translatable, automatic post-editing, and translation quality estimation. Localization teams that possess such technologies can expand beyond conventional localization to many real-time translation cases in customer and employee experience across their companies. And we intend to provide technology for these four pillars for a while, probably for a couple of years. But before this year, we used an older generation of language models, such as Berg, Laser, Labs, and so on, GPT-3 early versions. But those models were limited in their multilingual and generative capabilities. That's why we use them mostly within one language and in very, very few cases. And it all changed in the end of 2022 with the launch of the updated GPT-3 model first, end of November, and then this Cambrian explosion of the generative AI. And you'll hear more details about this rapid evolution today at our break session with my co-founder, Grigory, who's our CTO and runs our AI initiatives. But here I want to highlight GPT 3.5, because of its relatively high performance and low costs, and GPT-4 and Palm because of their multilingual capabilities. And with all that, we can automate more language tasks. And it provides a path to a bigger zoom out. With translation sufficiently automated, you can look at a bigger scope, creating content based on inputs, context, and style guides, making sure that content created across the company fits all of the requirements you have, making content more translatable, of course, translating content and checking that it aligns the guidelines and quality requirements, presenting it to users in a culture, context, and identity-aware, personalized fashion, and finally analyzing user experience, or we may better say language experience, collecting feedback and then incorporating into the process in semi-automated fashion. So in the localization industry, this shift is starting to happen as we speak, and I think it will be very visible at all the events you will see. And each of these green arrows here, we have at least one pilot or a promising experiment. We see that it works. However, it's important to note that this zoom out occurs more than just in the translation industry or more than just localization departments. Various pieces of software and various people involved in all other content-related tasks also want to zoom out as a primary daily routine gets automated. In general, this could create more jobs as people can do more things with language. However, it will also increase competition among leaders in the enterprises. And many localization technology companies seek to branch out, focusing on marketing, customer service, and other departments. And we discussed it as well. And we decided that we put our trust and faith in you, localization leaders, not only because we have worked with localization teams wholeheartedly for many years, but also because we believe that those in the translation industry have a head start. Localization people have been working alongside AI and machine learning for years now, while everyone today figuring out how to post-edit ChatGPT output, it all inside out. Integrating the drafting technology in the workflows, convincing your teammates and vendors to use it, negotiating rates, running quality assurance processes, and organizing many, many more things in a way that saves time and resources. And that's why I believe you as localization leaders are ahead in this game. And we are determined to support you however we can and guide your zooming out process. As many of you know, I personally spent much time over the last couple of months sharing our GPT insights and brainstorming where it can be helpful in specific localization contexts, so as other people in our team. And this webinar supports this endeavor. We have invited industry experts who will share their first-hand experiences with GPT-related technologies. And, GPT is actually recently got trademarked by OpenAI. We're here speaking of a broader scope. Again, Grigory will provide what's on the table. It's much more. And remember, so we will share what works, what does not so far, and hopefully it will inspire all of you to do more. And whenever you need support, we're always here to help you. And before accepting one or two questions, if we have time, not sure, and passing the mic back to Mark, please let me bring a bit of a havoc. We've run lots of preparations with our panelists, and it's clear that we will have very specific pragmatic discussions about this new hype technology. However, let's check. So we have asked GPT to generate the most general and annoying GPT buzzwords. We put them on bingo cards. And if you follow this QR code or link, which we'll paste in chat now, you will get your own unique card. And while listening to the panels, if you spot one of the panelists using a buzzword, please cross it out by clicking on the corresponding cell. So once you got a full row, column, or diagonal of buzzwords, please take a screenshot and send it to us at hello@intento.to. And the first 3 senders will receive $50 Amazon gift cards. We're probably tight on time. I'm not sure if we'll announce the winners today, but we'll make sure to highlight them in our social media with the cards and other context. That's with that. Mark, do we have time for questions?
I think if it's okay, why don't we leave questions till after the first session, just to make sure we leave time for the sessions.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Then stop sharing, and mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Konstantin. So everybody make sure to be filling in your bingo cards. Look forward to seeing some winners later on in the webinar. So now we'll jump right in and we'll start our first panel discussion. It's entitled GPT and Localization, Real World Use Cases and Results. So panelists, please join me on stage. And we've got Hartmut von Berg, Senior Director of Global Localization at GoTo. We've got Bodo Vahldieck, Senior Globalization Quality Manager at VMware. We've got Tommaso Rossi, Senior Director of Localization at Expedia. We've got Olga Hergül, Global Content and Localization Program Manager at Şişecam. And Konstantin will be the moderator for the first panel. So Konstantin, right back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. So let's start our first panel discussion, and it will be on the GPT use cases and localization. So we have, as Mark said, we have 4 localization leaders and challenges which waited for the large language models to emerge, to be solved. We'll start from 5-minute overview from each of the panelists. So please introduce yourself, describe your business context, the use cases you found the most important or safe to start experimenting with GPT, and what worked and what did not. Let's start from you, Olga.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Olga Hergül, and I'm a localization program manager at Şişecam, a leading global glass manufacturer originating from Turkey. Founded in 1935, our company has a global presence with 45 production facilities in 14 countries and 24,000 employees speaking different languages, as well as sales into over 150 countries. So you can imagine how important localization is for our company, and I'm quite excited and happy to be here and discuss the interesting and hot topic of large language models. So these days, everyone has been experimenting with this groundbreaking technology, and as the localization team at Şişecam, we have also started to explore how we can capitalize on these new opportunities and enhance the efficiency of our workflows. So driven by our company-specific language landscape, we have begun to test different use cases for GPT. And I must mention that we haven't yet deployed any GPT-related workflow into production. However, the initial results have been highly promising, and we hope that we can roll out these workflows at a larger scale in the near future. So we have been primarily focusing on 2 use cases, which are source content improvement or source quality improvement and automated post-editing. Since Şişecam is a company originating from Turkey, the majority of content is produced in the Turkish language. And this poses certain challenges for our team, as this content requires high-quality translations into English before it can be further localized into the other 11 corporate languages. And moreover, the syntax in the Turkish language is also quite specific, and particularly in the corporate environment, people tend to use longer sentences with numerous descriptive details and complex structure, and translating such content is a challenging task, not only for machine translation, but for human translators as well. And this complexity often results into fluency and credibility issues in English. And typically, we would tackle these problems through multi-stage linguist interventions, but as you probably all know, it is quite costly and time-consuming. So with GPT, we tested different process combinations, such as source quality improvement for Turkish plus machine translation, or machine translation plus automated post-editing for English, or 3 stages in a row. And the initial results have been quite promising. GPT worked surprisingly well for Turkish in terms of source quality improvement, and it transformed the content into text that can be better handled by machine translation. So we tested different types of content, including corporate communications, such as press releases, interviews, then internal employee communications, and internal regulations. And similar to machine translation, GPT demonstrated better results for particular types of content. In our case, these were internal regulations and internal employee communications. And the output was, for some examples, for some text, the output was so good and sophisticated that it required minimal or basically no human intervention. However, one of the important observations that we made during these tests is that GTP has a very specific way of transforming content. And this transformation often leads into changes in tone of voice and style due to some word replacements or omissions. And this can be quite critical for style-sensitive content, let's say, such as press releases or interviews, where the company-specific terminology and tone of voice is essential and needs to be preserved. So this finding actually highlighted the importance of guidelines, of style guides, when working with large language models. So to sum up, the test results demonstrated a really strong use case for integrating GPT or alternative large language models into our localization workflows. And we are quite eager to further test and then implement it in the real life in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. Indeed, I think source quality improvement outside of the English language is something we could not imagine just 5 months ago. You also mentioned this problem of preserving brand tone of voice, but that's something we may discuss after the introductions. Before we continue, I wanted to ask you questions right away in Q&A, not in the chat, because chat only hosts see that. So please ask them using Q&A tool in Zoom. Yeah, thank you. And Bodo, would you like to share your story?
Yeah, thank you, Konstantin. So let me introduce me first. My name is Bodo Vahldieck. I'm the Senior Quality Manager at VMware Marketing Localization Group. And yeah, I have 30 years of experience in localization, from software to documentation, and now 10 years in marketing, almost there. I think VMware is a global leader in software virtualization solutions and help business actually to transfer the IT infrastructure and drive the digital transformation. So it's not really a mainstream product for everybody. It's very special, very narrow segment, probably similar like Olga's world, the glass manufacturing technology. So in my career, and Konstantin said this earlier, when he was starting the webinar here, I have witnessed a lot of transformative power of technology in our industry. And we have had all these situations before. So when we had automatic software testing and localization, everybody's saying, oh, dangerous, don't do it. Then the CAD tools and TM came up with. I still remember how I've done this some 25 years. The first big project for the organization used TM. How can this work? Leveraging and not doing 100% on ice matches. Then we had localization process automations, and we gave a lot of things what Konstantin mentioned, automate. What was the buzzword? Then there was something coming called controlled English. We quickly forgot. And we went on at VMware in the content classification and analysis. What are we actually doing? And this was a very successful approach. We took over from Taos, this dynamic quality framework, and suddenly we could do more things. We had a systematic evaluation of quality, and we could use statistical and neural machine translation very successful because we suddenly could measure. the success. And this is for us something which is actually a good step going forward. Now, Konstantin mentioned as well, quality management, source quality. In the last decades, 3 decades, globalization or pre-production activities were always harbored in the localization team and the organizations I worked with. And it was seen as something, yeah, it's good that you do it, but why are you doing this? Why are you doing improving source text? Why do you think source text improvement should be done like that? So I'm constantly looking for something where we can improve the source text improvement, where we can move this in the right spot, preferably to the authors. With AI, we see now the first time we can give the authors a tool in their hands to check without us writing up errors in the source text and send it to them very visibly. So that's my hope out my experience there. And there's another thing I learned in my career. It is possible that the new cool technology doesn't work. And we need to have this in mind as well. We need to be fair with us and keep this in mind. So enough about the learning. What are we doing? What have we done at VMware with AI? I think I was recently in a seminar where somebody said, if you want to go far, you don't go alone, you go together. This is something what I do at VMware is very important. Me alone being excited doesn't help. And I had to pull the brake and say, okay, I explained you what's GPT, what's Whisper, what's Grammarly, DeepL, Composer, and get them on the same level. Otherwise, you cannot communicate. And at the end of this month, we're actually using in production an AI technology for the video subtitling with one of our vendors. We are not, and similar like Olga, we are not using our corporate plugin, or we don't have a corporate plugin for ChatGPT in May, but we see definitely it is helping us to improve that. In the current situation in translation, with my quality management hat on, I have to say, well, it's clear. We see this in the quality. People, translators are using machine translation and they are using chat GPT content. We see the increase in certain error categories in there. We are not worried because we have a quality management system background where we can do real-time 100% sampling methodologies and measure the quality quite closely. And that's something where we want to collaborate with Intento as well a little bit. Can we do something with this data? And in terms of what are we really doing? What have we done? What have we tested? I started actually with a small group to test and pilot the video localization. And I'm using out of the OpenAI, the Whisper technology. And I have to say that the Whisper technology is amazing. It extracts text from a video, and when you look at the accuracy of the speech recognition, it is amazing. A couple of months ago, I was looking actually for ASR models which can handle specific dialects. You don't need this for Whisper. The linguistic quality is at a different level, and the improvement of the spoken words, so removing the ums, the ers, and the double mentioning of words, is quite sensational. So this shows really this technology is ready to improve source. That's why we looked a little bit more into that. And Konstantin said at the beginning, yeah, what's not working? Oh, we have as well found out that this OpenAI Whisper technology is not so rock solid. Again, what we need is automated testing. We cannot have humans sit in front of a video and watch it and wait until something went wrong. So we need to have some text-based analysis. And again, all the technology people have can be actually used on today's new process. So was VMware's focus? I think I got kind of clear from my project management team surrounding me. If we use AI in localization at VMware and the marketing localization, it must save cost, it must improve turnaround time, and it cannot lower the quality. So that's clear. And I think what we are doing tactically, we are very close to put the translation with the Intento service in production. And in a little bit in future, we are looking at how we can automate the source code improvement with the idea, the Whisper idea, take the text, improve it, and then render it, and then put it to machine translation. And and as well, use the power of AI to speed up the reference process management. Look up in your reference guideline, in your style guide, or get examples. That's a little bit in the future, but that's what we are focusing on. And I'm proud that we already use something from AI in production, and we are learning. We go together, perhaps a little slower, but we will make it.
Thank you, Bodo. Not sure if you've seen this news, like yesterday, I think, maybe a couple of days ago, Meta published a Whisper competitor open source, which supports 1,100 languages. It detects 4,000 languages and tests half error rate of Whisper. So it's really
half error rate
daily.
of Whisper. No, I didn't see this.
Yes.
I mean, this is, if somebody knows what the error rate of Whisper is, half of it is sensational. Yeah.
Oh, hopefully. And I wanted to highlight that I think you mentioned you have this quality framework, and that's also what we see working with you, that you collect every step in the process, which is super important for automation and training. And also your quality framework is with adding generative AI, you'll see that it supports not only experiments with machine translation, but also experiments in a general content creation chain, which is super important with this technology. Thank you.
Welcome.
Hartmut, now to you.
Yeah, thanks, Konstantin. Thanks to Olga and Bodo for sharing the interesting use cases. So my name is Hartmut von Berg. I'm Senior Director of Localization at GoTo, a company maybe well known for our conferencing products, GoToMeeting, GoTo Training, GoTo Webinar, but also for our IT support products, the second field that we are in, like Rescue, Central, GoTo Assist, etc. So to say, we already leverage GPT in one of our products in a beta version. That's out. That's for creating campaigns in a customer engagement module, where you can select your contacts based on generative AI, provide some context about what you want to promote, and then you can select some additional filters that are embedded in the prompt, and then you get a campaign created, and that is going to be sent out to your target customers. So that's something that we are doing real life, but has nothing to do with localization, but the company is pretty strong behind exploring AI and leveraging AI, and hence localization is one of the things where we think it really makes sense, and there's a lot of opportunity. From our point of view, from a localization standpoint, what we did in the past with AI is mainly focusing on translating content that is suited for AI, and that is technical documentation where it works well, where you can do output the raw content and serve your users, because it's about transporting the content. It's not so much about the fluency or adequacy, etc. Because people going to your support site, they have a problem, they want to get that solved, and as long as they understand the content, they in a way that it solves their problem, everything is fine. I wouldn't say they don't care about the linguistic quality. It's always bad if you read something that is not sounding very nice. But as long as you get your problem solved, all is fine, because that has priority. But now with generative AI, a way larger field opens, and that is content creation, copywriting. So we can open the way towards marketing localization and adapting marketing content to the specific markets. And that is also the business case or the use case that we are currently exploring with the help of Intento. We made a first pass, a first evaluation, whether it's suitable or not. but I need to tell you a little bit why, and that is just a year ago, we've undergone a rebrand. So formerly we have been known as Log Me In, or LMI, with a wide range of product names who came in through acquisitions, and now we consolidated everything under one brand, which is GoTo. All the products were rebranded, the companies rebranded, company messaging, and we took that opportunity to create brand guidelines, editorial style guides for all types of contents, and we localized or created brand localization guidelines to really create a consistent experience across our markets, but very well adapted to our markets. And those guidelines have been created in an attempt to educate the translators, the transcreators, the copywriters, the marketing agencies that we leverage, so that they know how we want to speak to the market, what messages we want to transport, and that they can do their magic work then in transcreating or even copywriting. The challenge that comes with that is, how do we ensure that people that are doing that work for us, how do we ensure they adhere to those guidelines? Because we are producing a lot of content, and we can't have a big workforce sitting down and doing reviews in market, and then having extensive review loops. So what we aimed to achieve is leveraging generative AI to do a kind of quality assurance and review, but focused on brand guidelines, on tone of voice, on inclusivity, and all the aspects that are in there, including terminology, specific terminology that we use, etc. And so we started with using the big brand localization guidelines, which is together with the style guides, roughly 120 pages, typical thing that is available in most of the companies. And then the idea was to feed that as context into the machine and provide source content and the translated content, and then figure out whether the translated content has changed the tone of voice as expected, and all these aspects. What we found out in the first pass is that given either large guidelines or large text for analysis, GPT focuses attention on some parts of the costs of others. So if you have an extended guideline, the attention window for context seems to be smaller. If text is too large, it only looks at certain parts. So the learning out of that is we need to break that down and maybe have several passes in parallel or sequentially, just checking for very specific aspects of it. So that would be one of the next steps that we will try, how we can improve the outputs with that method. Other findings, we need to split things into meaningful blocks for the content and the output text. And also we found out that probably the inclusivity formality is pretty easy to detect, others a little bit harder. I've seen some errors in the output there, or some misses. So we need to find out where this comes from. But one big thing that we learned is all those brand guidelines, usually they are created for humans. They are written for humans to understand and to apply them. And we believe now we need to rewrite them and tailor them for the machine to get the best results out of it. So really think about how do we need to feed the machine, what is important information, what not, how can we sequence or parallelize the jobs in order to get the best outputs and get a quality assurance system where we can automatically spot those errors and send them back to the translators and copywriters in terms of a feedback process so that they can improve their work.
Thank you, Hartmut. Very interesting. And I still remember it was, oh my God, it was like 4 years ago, maybe. Jörg Kirchner from Dell shared that after they introduced machine translation post-editing, they actually had to change the guidelines because guidelines were written to human translators and they led to excessive post-editing because they were focused on other types of errors. So probably that's very aligned with what you just described. And now let's turn to Tommaso. We have specifically put Expedia forth because we know that they had an unfair advantage of early access to the latest versions of GPT, and even I think you were a launch partner for the GPT plugin store, right? So please share what you are doing with GPT and localization. Tommaso.
Thank you, Konstantin. Hi, everybody. My name is Tommaso Rossi. I am the head of localization for Expedia Group. First of all, thank you, Konstantin, and thank you, Intento, for having us and for organizing this event. It's very interesting. Everybody's talking about it, so it's good to regroup as an industry and try to share our learning and our observations. I've been working localization for a little bit, almost 20 years, and I am old enough to remember the arrival of translation memories first, and then the arrival of machine translation. And now we're talking about AI. So it's kind of the third time a charm here, and try to relive the arrival of technology and try and see over and over again pretty much the same reaction, the same defensiveness and concerns, but eventually also giving in and try to get curious and experimental with these new toys. As Konstantin said, I'm very privileged that my company has announced a few weeks ago a built-in connector with GPT. So now through the Expedia app, it is possible to ask ChatGPT to basically give us recommendations and a suggestion on how to build the ideal holiday. Obviously, the more information we give in the discussion, the more tailored the conversation gets, and eventually you end up in an open-ended conversation with ChatGPT, and the technology will give you information about where to stay, where to go, and what kind of time of the year to choose for that specific destination. So it gets really sophisticated, and we are very happy and excited about this opportunity. Having this opportunity in the company means also that, of course, the entire Expedia Group organization has the ability to leverage and take advantage of this technology that has been connected to our safe environment. And this gives us the opportunity to really play with it and experiment and try to understand how to leverage this technology to further advancement and efficiency. Now, as the head of localization, I can only be very curious and very interested in this. So this is what happened in my space. In the last few months after this decision of the company, which I'm very grateful for, we have started listing down the different options that we might have in front of us in order to leverage this technology in our multilingual space. Expedia is a global company. We have multiple points of sales across the globe. We localize our products in at least 20 languages or more, depending on the product that you're using. And for us, it is very important to always get the right content in the right place in our product, in our website. The reason for this is because communicating to our traveler and our business partners is the key for our success in attracting traveler in the travel experiences we're trying to build. Now, when we started listing down the possible use case that we could potentially identify for GPT, immediately the first thing that came into mind is content creation. We have a lot of creative content requirements across the company, and my team supports all different departments in building and creating and designing content in language for multiple purposes. Now we launched a test for a couple of handful of languages, and the results they are not necessarily as promising as we hoped, meaning that I think that we were hoping to get very promising results where we have almost no human touch needed in order to optimize the content created, and eventually realize that, and unfortunately, at least with preliminary tests, the technology is not at point, meaning we still need a lot of effort. We see a lot of effort required in fact checking, in the quality of information that we get. Let's keep in mind that GPT gets their information and their intel updated on a regular basis, but that doesn't mean that it's always up to date with the very last information. And then at the same time, we also realized that our content is so tailored for the travel industry and for what we really require to attract the attention of the traveler and the business partner, that in order for the machine, for GPT, to comply with our style guides and glossaries and tones and requirements, it does still need a very heavy effort of rewriting for our post editor and our copywriter. So basically, the lesson learned here is that for the moment, the technology is not ready to be used off the shelf. There still needs a lot of human intervention required, to the point that we're trying to evaluate if this is worth it, or if it's better to write everything from scratch. But most importantly, what we learned is that everything stays in. The secret is to get better and at the prompt. The more detailed we get in writing a prompt that is comprehensive, that is guardrailed, and that will help the machine to really understand the target that we are aiming to, is probably the key to success. So what we are trying to do now as a second stage after the first round of tests is to get better at the prompt engineering and try to understand how to guardrail content, how to teach GPT with our own terminology and style guides and guidelines, how to get closer to the result we want to get. And hopefully after that, we will try to test over and over again in language and try to understand if the machine is actually following the path that we are designing for them. Now, after content creation and copywriting, the other thing that we immediately jumped on is a comparison, like everybody's doing probably right now, between GPT technology and the existing machine translation provider. It is quite interesting. Originally, I was reading a lot of literature in the industry saying it's not yet on point and it's not there yet. And I think that the larger machine translation engines on the market are still getting better. Well, I thought it would be interesting to actually test our own content, and the results that we're getting today is that the quality getting out of GPT is very much comparable to the machine translation engines that we are currently using, depending on language pair and content type. This means that potentially with further testing, we could discover that with one solution, which is the GPT technology, we could potentially reach the same level that we get by targeting the right engine for the right language pair and the language content type across the board. So the results in machine translation are very promising. And we're going to further test, because right now we only had the chance of testing a small group of languages. But most importantly, as we all know, the machine translation works very differently depending on the content type and the type of test that we are asking the machine to translate. So we want to make our test more sophisticated, testing also more descriptive text, more terminology heavy text, and try to understand how that works. Now, the last part is that I have identified a couple of use cases for GPT that are potentially maybe niche in my own space, but I found them very interesting, and actually that is where I found the most value. One is as a global company, we have a very large amount of geography content to localize in order to allow everybody who is looking for a specific town in a specific city to find their solution in the travel as a travel solution. And we need to localize everything. The difficult part is there is a very massive amount of terminology that doesn't get actually localized, but simply transliterated from an alphabet to another. Actually, this is where GPT is extremely successful. So we took a very large portion of our database of English geography content, and we push it through GPT to understand if the technology is successful in turning it into Japanese, into Chinese, into Korean, but also into Greek and Hebrew, for example, or Arabic, and it worked really, really well. The error ratio is very, very low. The success rates is obviously high. So that is a very successful preliminary test. We want to obviously go further with more content and a little bit more sophisticated approach, but the initial result is very promising. And the other part that we have already launched is ambitiously, together with the machine translation test, we have also thought about allowing or asking the technology to turn a text from one language flavor to another. Now, I'm fully aware that, for example, French EU and French Canada are two very different languages, but they have similarities, more both in language structure and in terminology. And the same happens for Castilian Spanish and Latin American, Central American Spanish, so on and so forth. So we have tried to ask the technology to do so, and well, for the beginning, we tried a very simpler use case, which is English. So turning US English into UK English, and again, the result is very positive. So we want to go into more language flavors, more use cases, and see if we can reproduce the same success for locals.
Thank you, Tommaso. Yeah, I think actually transliteration and doing cross-dialect is things which are super complex with machine translation, requires lots of hacks and workarounds. We have, I'm astonished by the number of questions we have and how little time we have for them. So we'll take few. And for the rest, I think we will just share them with the panelists. We'll collect answers, and then we'll share them after the event. I will pick one. I see it's answered, but I think it may be some interesting discussion related to Tommaso, what you also mentioned. There's a question, from Rossi. In which phases of your aided translation workflow would human translators intervene, and how? Because Tommaso, you mentioned that you see there is a need for humans to be there because the output is not very. Bodo, maybe you'll start on this question.
Yeah, we have this based on the content type, and it's right after translation we have the humans involved, and we give the humans actually only the stuff we know this might be new or changed or critical or processed with a new empty engine. So we can be very selective. This is what we are doing. We have as well a process of it that we do it after the fact, so it's kind of self-certification. And that helps us then after the fact to detect if a certain process is not generating that quality, and then we would roll back the process to another one.
Mm-hmm. And Tommaso, what's your approach there? Because even with transliteration, you probably want to have some control over what's being generated.
Yes, 100%. So we push in our workflow. We push the content through a corporate platform. We process everything that we can automatically in that environment, where we can also plug very easily GPT thanks to the corporate connector. And then everything that needs a human intervention then goes into a TMS that allows people to improve the content, or B, review it and validate it. So it's very important to kind of compartmentalize the two aspects.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I would one thing which is not in the questions, but it was we touched here and there in your presentations about the brand voice, about ability. Olga, you mentioned that GPT introduces its own style, and we know that if you look at styles of, for example, large technology companies, they're very different. So how to so I would direct it to Olga and Hartmut. What are thoughts about building your own style and brand voice in GPT?
Yeah, this is quite an important subject for us, and this is probably why we will not deploy this technology for style-sensitive content in the first place, because this issue needs to be handled in a very specific way, because it will probably require multiplication of style guides for very specific types of content. And I already see this work coming in the future. So yes, it certainly does omit certain terminology that can be repetitive, but it is intentionally repetitive, for example, and these types of terminology describes our brand voice in a very particular way. So yes, the guidelines need to be adjusted, just as our colleagues said when we needed to adjust style guides from human translators to machine translation. Now, this time we will have to reinvent them in a form that will be understood better by GPT or other large language models, because it obviously requires a slightly different approach, a more detailed approach. So yeah, it is an important subject everyone will probably focus in on.
Thank you. And Hartmut, what do you think? Also, you mentioned that you built copies for different cultures and you want them to be adjusted to this culture. How you think you can balance that with just introducing biases related to this country which you're adjusting content to?
That's definitely a big question, and it's dependent on how the output will be in further tests. We are currently also thinking about doing something that we did in an experiment for care, like running our own instance and training it and applying that specific bias instead of just leveraging the generic version to see whether that can provide better output, because we want to have that bias. But biasing is intentional in this case, and yeah, but maybe we have to switch over to get something more cleaner, so that it is not biased by whatever the Apple style or the Microsoft style, which is so the style, marketing style that is in this general engine.
Yeah, I think big companies have advantage here because they created so much content that it's probably already got indexed by the model. They can just say, do my style, but maybe we can do like palette, mixing different colors. Thank you so much. I know we're at time. We have 21 questions. We will find a way. I think we'll share them, have them answered, and then we'll publish. And I think, Mark, next time, gosh, I wish we had this as like fireside conversations. I think that's what we'll do next time.
Indeed.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, panelists.
Great.
Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone, so much. Yeah, great discussion and great questions from the audience. Yeah, terrific to see. All right, now we'll move on to a mini session. We're going to do a brief history of large language models. That's going to be hosted by Intento's co-founder, Grigory Sapunov. Grigory, please join me on the stage. Great.
Thank you, Mark.
And Grigory is the co-founder and CTO of Intento. He has a PhD in AI and over 20 years of programming experience. On a personal note, I'm at the far opposite end of the technology expertise spectrum from Grigory. And I find his style of conveying deep technical information to be incredibly approachable and highly engaging. So I hope you feel the same. Grigory, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I will use this beautiful evolutionary tree. I just take it from a recent paper on large language models. The paper was published a month ago, and interestingly, in the last month, a lot of new models already appeared. So this image is already a bit outdated. I will talk about differences at the end. And before talking about large language models or LLMs, it's worth saying a few words about just language models, not large or LMs. Actually, LM or language model is a way to model sequences of words like sentences or documents. And LMs usually build a probability distribution over words, and they can assign probabilities to sequences of words. This way, they're frequently used to choose between different sentences, for example, which one has the largest probability assigned, or to generate new sequences or sentences, typically predicting the next word in a document and doing it repeatedly until you produce the whole document, for example. Language models emerged long before 2020s. In the past, in the prehistoric age of language models, there were n-gram language models built with Markov chains, and the first neural language model or language model built using neural network was introduced in early 2000 years, more than 20 years ago, actually. The emergence of large language models actually is heavily linked to the emergence of the transformer architecture. Google published their paper on transformers in 2017, and before 2017, there are language models built on different technology, like recurrent neural networks or feed-forward neural networks. In this image, they are marked with gray color, like Elmo or ULM-Feed or Glove and so on. In 2018, there were two important language models published. Google published and open sourced their BERT model. It was a huge advancement of the NLP field because many solutions were built on BERT. It was really great, and many people say that it was kind of ImageNet moment or Sputnik moment for NLP. BERT was a significant achievement. And by the way, several years ago, Google incorporated BERT into their search engine to solve different things like ranking, producing good search snippets, and so on. And in the same year, OpenAI built their first transformer model, GPT, the first version of GPT, generative pre-trained transformer. As you see in this image, there are different branches colored by different colors. There are pink branch, green branch, and how to say it, blue or blue-gray branch. There are actually different architectures of transformers: encoders, decoders, and encoder-decoders. BERT was the encoder type model. They typically restore corrupted sequences. Decoder, like GPT, produce next token given some prefix. Now it is called prompt, or previous tokens. And encoder-decoder combines both encoder and decoder. It's usually consume an input sequence, then it generates new sequence given the encoded input and some prefix. At the beginning, many models were named after Muppet Show characters, then probably like Elmo, Bert, Roberta, Big Bird, Ernie, and so on. And then probably when these names depleted, people start using other names, and sometimes these names are different just in a single character. So for example, do not confuse Bert, Bart, and Bard. These are completely different models residing in different branches of the tree and doing different things. So a few words about these three branches. Encoders, this branch flourished a few years ago with a lot of different BERT style transformers. As I said, they are usually trained to restore masked words in a sequence, so kind of denoising a noisy sequence. Now there are not much activity here, and some people actually treat this branch as deprecated, but it's still useful for generating sequence embeddings and performing classification type tasks. Decoder is now the most actively developed branch, and typically they train to generate the next token given previous tokens. And encoder-decoder is a mix of both. Actually, this was the original architecture of transformer that was published by Google paper. The task for transformer for encoder-decoder is formulated as a general sequence transformation. They take some input sequence and they transform it into some output sequence. Decoders architecturally are less general than the full encoder-decoder architecture, but for most cases they are good enough, and right now we see a Cambrian explosion of decoder-style models. What are the trends right now? The one obvious trend is that the models become larger and larger, and their size is typically measured in the number of parameters. Say GPT-3 had 175 billion parameters. That's a lot. If you encode it just as a floating point numbers, it's just 700 gigabytes just to store the model. And for GPT-4, we do not know the exact size, and some other models right now, and companies do not publish their details because they're afraid of competitors, probably. But we are already in the era of really huge models that do not fit into a single computer, into a single GPU, and you have to own a cluster of GPUs to run these models. So that's one obvious trend, and it still continues. Different companies try to train larger and larger models, and these models demonstrate interesting emergent behaviors. That's really cool. Another important trend is that these models become multilingual. You probably saw in our blog a couple of posts regarding GPT 3.5 and GPT-4 translation capabilities, and they have really great translation capabilities. And recently announced Google's model called Palm 2. It was explicitly trained on more than 100 languages, and by their own internal benchmarks, it's already better than Google production system, Google Translate. So soon it will be available to general audience, and it's a huge shift, I believe. And many other models are multilingual right now, supporting different human languages, different programming languages, frequently in the same model. So you can generate code, you can generate languages, and that's really great. And multilinguality is the obvious trend. Another interesting trend is open source models are blooming right now. Actually, the last couple of months, starting publication by Meta with their Llama model. And since then, tens of different models were published, and the progress here is really huge. So we'll see where the industry will come. And another important thing is that inherently, and transformer architecture has a limitation. It has a fixed context window size. That means that there is a limit of the text which you can put into model at its input, and at the same time there is a limit at the total size of the text the model can generate. And previously, GPT-3 has a limit of nearly 4,000 tokens, and GPT-4 right now has a limit of nearly 8,000 tokens. They has a special version with 32K tokens, but it's still a limitation. And recently, Anthropic announced their new Cloud Air model with 100K tokens. That's, I believe, a game changer, because now you can work with a really long text and produce really long text. So that's another trend. More models will be available with large context window. And the last trend is that the models become multimodal. That means that they can consume or produce not only text content, but, for example, image content. The GPT-4 originally was trained in multimodal setting. It can consume both images and text. Right now in the API, we still can only access the text part of the model, but hopefully soon OpenAI will allow access to the image processing data as well. And since then, we can do much more. For example, doing OCR with GPT-like models. That's great again, and many other models are multimodal. So I'll stop here for now. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I see a lot of questions from the previous session.
And I see one actually, Grigory, I see one coming in. So one of the questions is, can you discuss the significance of GPT-1 and its impact on the field? I know you touched upon that earlier a bit, but can you go a bit into more detail on that?
Yeah, I believe GPT-1 was not a significant achievement because OpenAI themselves already have had language models before. They were trained on recurrent neural networks, and maybe a year or 2 years before the GPT-1, they published a beautiful paper. They trained a model on Amazon reviews, and they found a sentiment neuron in this model, and affecting this neuron, you could produce positive or negative text, and that was great. So GPT-1 was continuation of this line of work. They just changed the architecture of the model. I personally believe that the most significant advance was GPT-3, because in GPT-3 they demonstrated the in-context learning abilities at scale, and they demonstrated a lot of emergent abilities that was really important and really great. I deeply respect the OpenAI team, and they shared a lot of information. Right now, it's rare to see such detailed paper. Even then, they still omitted some things, but it was great. So GPT-1 is not a big game, not a game changer, but the previous models and the following ones, I believe, truly important.
Great, thanks for the answer. And by the way, how many pages is 100,000 tokens?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a lot. Typically,
it's about 30 pages. 25, 30 pages should be. That's very, very unique, because if you can do full text translation of such a text or transformation.
Yeah, depending on the language, a typical word is say 2 to 3 tokens. But for some languages, it's more tokens. So you can calculate from a typical size of a page in different languages.
Gotcha. And if we asked you one more quick question, if we asked you for what you think are the most, I know this is probably a long answer, but try to make it a short answer. What are the most exciting future trends you see in large language models right now?
I believe in multimodality. Multilinguality is already here, but multimodality is still an open question, and I believe we'll see completely new use cases with these models.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you, Grigory. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
So we will move on to our final panel. So if the panelists could please join me on stage. Our next panel discussion is entitled Getting Started with GPT in Localization. So we're going to go back to sort of the basics of how to get started, best practices you can follow when starting to use GPT in localization, challenges to look out for. So we're joined today for this panel by Peter Tatishchev, Senior Product Manager, Internationalization at Disney, Adam Ali, IT Strategist at Government of Canada, Ray Flournoy, former VP of Product at Etsy, Bea Verdasco, Head of Localization at Trendyol, and Daria Sinitsyna, Lead Computational Linguist at Intento, will be moderating the panel. With that, Daria, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. All right. Hello, everybody. It's really nice to see you all here. And as Mark said, our panel is called Getting Started with GPT and Localization. And our panel is going to focus on the first steps and potential challenges of implementing GPT for a localization pipeline. We will discuss how to get started and how to overcome any issues or potential hurdles when it comes to GPT. First, I'd like to start by asking each of you to talk about any experience you have with GPT in localization or any plans for future use that you see fit for your company. Bea, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, I'll intro myself first. I'm Bea Verdasco, and I've been working on localization and content strategy for over 15 years. Currently working at another Turkish company. We were commenting earlier with Olga how unusual it is to have two Turkish companies in one panel. And we can share probably similar challenges. And I can share one particular case scenario that we have had at Trendyol that we're actually currently dealing with. We generate product descriptions at a very high speed. And this means lots and lots of text, high volume of text. And our source content, in this case, we don't have a lot of confidence in the quality of the source content because it is written very, very fast. So content generation is how we solved a particular problem in localization, where we needed text in the target languages that were accurate to describe our products. And we had the pieces of content that could go into it, the category of the products, the attributes, the values, but we didn't have a great content writing setup. So content generation with not GPT specifically, because this was a year and a half ago, was the solution to a localization problem. And so we started by basically polishing those pieces that go into the content generation engine and creating this text in the target languages right away. And now that these language models have improved so much, we are testing GPT, different versions for this scenario and others. And like our previous panel discussed, we're also testing copy improvement with GPT before putting it through machine translation or content generation workflows.
Awesome. Thank you. We're quite familiar with multilingual content generation as well. We're trying to figure out how to go about it with GPT. So that is a familiar use case for us as well. Ray, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Ray Flournoy. Up until just actually a couple weeks ago, I was a VP of product over at Etsy. And during my time there, one of the product teams that I oversaw was international, and translation and localization was part of that. For those of you not familiar with Etsy, we're a marketplace with an emphasis on handmade items. So we support a global community of what we call micro entrepreneurs, creative artisans and artists around the world as they sell their items. And our localization problem, I guess, is a little bit unique in that our focus was not so much on the text that Etsy as a company produced in translating that. That amount of text actually was relatively small compared to other companies, especially. But rather, we were concerned about how to translate the content that our sellers were producing. We have over 100 million items for sale on the site. Many of them sold, they're unique, one of a kind, sold once or very few times. We have a community of sellers. It's about 8 million sellers now, I believe. We were, in the early days, we were aggressive with using machine translation, and we found very good results with that. We found that we could default to machine translation, and people could depend on buyers could depend on machine translation to make those buying decisions. But we always knew that the best quality listing descriptions came when the seller herself was multilingual and could write those listings in multiple languages. But that's a lot of work, and a lot of our sellers maybe are familiar in other languages, but not confident enough to write those listings. So we were always trying to figure out what tools could we provide to our sellers to help them with this process. With generative AI, we were at the early stages. Etsy was at the early stages of trying to figure out where it could be leveraged across our product. But for this product problem in particular, it was a real question of, is this something that we could present to sellers to help them translate their listings into other languages, especially ones that they have minimal competency in, such that they could still do that quality check. They're still responsible for the contents of that listing. So they are making essentially a business contract with their buyer, so that the accuracy is very important. This ultimately is the question, but we think that there's a huge amount of potential. Generative AI can take in many inputs, so the original listing description, as well as photos, things like that. So we think that there's a tremendous amount of potential there. And that's a basic problem case that we're looking at.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely, because the product descriptions are quite hard with MT because of the contextual windows and stuff like this. So of course, GPT would be a huge help when it comes to context preservation. Adam, would you like to go next?
Hello, yes. So Adam Ali, IT strategist for the Government of Canada. Thank you, Intento, for having me and allowing me to share our journey so far with ChatGPT and large language models in general. I've been in the public sector for over 20 years, several roles, mostly on the technology side of things. Majority of that time was spent at the Translation Bureau, which is one of the largest LSPs in the world. Our bread and butter is English to French language translation and localization. So in early 2000, my team and I started building out the now legacy techno-linguistic toolbox, which includes custom off-the-shelf applications and stuff like enterprise-grade translation re-engines, TMS systems, machine translation, CAT tools, and so on. So AI and large language models is certainly a very big topic of discussion these days, not just at the Bureau, but across all departments within the government. Network analytics have shown that traffic to ChatGPT has spiked significantly amongst government workers since it was introduced. We are aware that it's being used for generating and improving content, summarizing bodies of text, and to a lesser extent, translating English to French and vice versa. So with large language models, and more specifically ChatGPT, the Bureau has begun studying the impact it's having and will have on our business and operations. So some of the questions that come up often is, will demand for translation dip as a result of client generation source and the target content in both official languages? With content being generated by machine, will demand for revision and quality control increase? How do we as an organization prepare for the proliferation of AI and AI-powered tools and just about everything we do? We need to start thinking about training our workforce in AI, prompt engineering being a clear example of that. What skill set should translators of the future possess to prepare for a world where most content is AI generated or augmented at least by AI? And the governance and policy frameworks around internet-based large language models usage. But the more important question today, I think, is how are we at the Bureau leveraging ChatGPT today? Well, I can tell that we're pretty early in our journey with ChatGPT compared to some of the other panelists here today. However, we just recently started experimenting with OpenAI on Azure, which is a ChatGPT service with more control over our data, retention, and privacy. Some of the things we started to look into is source content improvements with some pretty good results, as many of the panelists have suggested. We've been running ChatGPT to see how well we can improve the source language or translation memories, as the quality of source text is typically inferior to target text, with the latter being generated by professional linguists. And I've seen some pretty good results with that. Improving correct and empty output, and just like source content improvement, we've seen some pretty compelling results. And empty quality assessment and estimation, although pretty good. We think that certain AI models may be better suited for that task. And of course, as a translation assistant, and one key takeaway for me so far in my experiments is that when doing sentence level translation, as is typically done with NMTs like Google Translate, it's somewhat inferior. However, it can be coaxed to produce some impressive translation in some scenarios with properly worded prompting. So the key takeaway, I think, is with good prompting, one can achieve some decent results, in some cases, better than generic NMTs, due probably to context awareness. So to sum up, we're very enthused about large language models and how AI will change our business. And we're focused on how we're evolving for a future where AI is embedded in just about everything we do. As a proud geek who to this day still thinkers with the Raspberry Pis, I've seen a lot of technologies not live up to the hype. AI and large language models, however, in my opinion, will be just as revolutionary as the internet was. So we're very excited, and I'm very thankful to have heard the other panelists here today because that's exciting stuff. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. You brought up Azure. We're trying to work with Azure as well because they have some integrations that are very interesting to us. For example, you spoke about the machine translation quality estimation, and they have the new Gemba metric that we're currently researching because it's the state of the art. So yes, all the familiar stuff, awesome. Really, really interesting stuff. Definitely. Absolutely. Thank you. Right, Peter?
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm Peter. I'm an internationalization product manager at Disney, particularly the Disney streaming part of the company. So everything related to everybody's favorite streaming services like Disney Plus, Star Plus, ESPN Plus, and all that. And we are, as an internationalization team, we are not strictly localization, but we are providing the tooling support and everything needed for the engineering teams and the localization teams to do their job properly. We are, as Disney streaming localization, we're probably not as advanced as some of the companies on the panel in terms of using the latest and greatest technologies. And as any large enterprise, when we look at the landscape and the workload that we're dealing with, we sort of realize that improvements that can come from machine translation and large language models for the translation process itself, or the language part of the translation process, are not as huge as the ROI for changes that we can get from implementing them at the workflow process. So dealing with our stakeholders, and when we were chatting with Konstantin about this panel, my suggestion was if we can use ChatGPT to sell translation and localization integration services to our stakeholders within the company, if we can get ChatGPT to sell itself to our stakeholders, that would have been the perfect use case for us. Because the bulk of the work that we do is having to deal with stakeholders to integrate different content platforms we have within Disney to the translation tooling that we have, and that's probably 90% of the work that we have to do. So when it comes to translation, we're fairly certain that we can deliver. But before getting to the translation is getting content for translation is the challenging part. So we are, I kind of under the hood, I do use ChatGPT to help me generate emails and help me generate product descriptions when we are building integration tag, which is not approved of, and I am being cautious to not use anything, not to generate anything confidential. And some of the great questions that I see asked about security and privacy issues, that's definitely a very big concern for us. And there is a lot of discussion going within Disney on how we can use that safely. Switching to the more language aspects of large language models, we are certainly looking at source improvement as well as target content generation using large language models. So rather than having an English source and translating it using MT or using LLM, we are considering generating target text using the same set of inputs that we use for English. So we have the French text generated from scratch rather than translating it from English using the same set of inputs. And again, the largest challenge we are dealing with right now is how do we make this securely? There has been industry gossip that even if you are using CAT tools, TMS tools from third-party services, your content is already in some of the large language models. So that's certainly a concern for us, and we're trying to figure out ways to make sure our content is safe. And we are evaluating ways of using language models in-house, but for that, we first need to figure out what is a sufficiently decent language model we can train in-house and disconnect it from the larger internet to make sure that it is serving us only and it's not going anywhere outside of the company. So that's what we are thinking right now. We're, as a very large and old company, we are trying to plan our way very carefully.
Thank you, Peter. That absolutely makes sense. And the security concerns that you just brought up, we're going to discuss them in a couple of minutes because this is a very important part of talking about GPT and using GPT for large companies, because security and privacy is something to be concerned of. So of course, great point here, obviously. All right, perfect. Thank you, everybody. And the next question we have here is, what are actually the first steps to using GPT? Or maybe some kind of perfect first steps to using GPT. There, would you be?
I don't have the perfect playbook. It's too early. But if there are any localization managers in the room, what I would share is that identify a good case scenario where you can use this tool and then test it. In our case, we had a case scenario where machine translation was the only feasible solution back then because of the high volume and the speed, and it was not good enough because our source language was Turkish, and the quality that we were getting on the output was not good enough for our users. So we tried content generation instead because it solved the question of speed and volume and quality at the same time. And cost-wise, it was even more cost-efficient than machine translation. And this is, I think, a very good case for GPT. So that would be the first step. Identify a chunk of content where translation is not a feasible solution, but content generation might be. Another good case scenario for GPT would be source quality improvement. And this is particularly relevant in lower resource languages like Turkish. If you have a pair like ours, for example, Turkish to German, improving the source and tweaking the source might be a better solution than off-the-shelf machine translation.
Yes, definitely. Source quality improvement is very, very important, and it makes life easier. That is very true. Adam?
Yeah, I think for us, framework for usage for internet-based large language models has to be put in place. That is being done on higher levels of the government. But on the whole, content generation is something we do a lot of in the government, programs, policies, frameworks, and so on. So I think we have large bodies of text that it would necessitate to create probably a reasonably sized custom large language model that we can host internally, much like Peter suggested earlier. I mean, the endeavor obviously necessitates a tremendous amount of preparation, resourcing, like gathering, collecting data, setting up infrastructure, or outsourcing the type of work, and serving the language. But last but not least is the guardrails we have to put in place to minimize the harmful effect of hallucination, bias, and so on. We are quite concerned with data leaks, and if you listen to the news today, you're hearing a lot about that. So that's it. When we roll out any technology in the government, security and data privacy is at the top of the mind. So I think regulatory frameworks and usage guidelines are super important.
Yes, of course. And the ability to host your own language model, to build your own language model, it's gonna take some heavy lifting, most likely. But the result would be, but the result would be probably so nice, because you'll be able to use it probably for most parts of your pipeline, of your specific pipeline, which is great. Thank you, Adam. What about you, Ray?
Yes, similarly, I'm scared by the word perfect. We were pretty early in our investigation, but whenever we've looked at translation tools for our seller community, the issue is always, what does the UI look like? I think when you introduce translation tools, translation technology into the traditional localization workflow, you can hopefully depend on having a small community of fairly sophisticated users, i.e. your translators, and being able to leverage their experience with language, their familiarity, etc. But with our sellers, around the world, the vast majority of them are not acquainted with localization, even if they have knowledge of multiple languages. They're not linguists necessarily. So how do we create integrations which are actually usable for people who are less sophisticated translators, and present it in a context where it actually augments their goal, which is to make a sale. That ultimately is what drives all of our tool evaluation and adoption, and is the trickiest part, especially with a new tool like ChatGPT.
Definitely, and it is a very important question of how to make it useful to your clients, and how to make it useful to people, because it just appeared in the market for a large number of people, and of course, it's still a lot of research to be done. Thank you, Ray. And of course, it is very important to talk about the first steps, but we cannot do that without talking about some challenges. And one of the most prominent challenges that has been brought up by Peter and Adam is the security concern. So that is going to be my next question. What do you believe the security concerns here are? And Peter, would you like to go first here with this question?
Where do I start? As I was listening to Adam answering the previous question, I could not help but compare the situation we have at Disney with that of the Canadian government. It almost feels like we're a country of our own when it comes to security considerations, and that's, I mean, I cannot understate how important it is for us, and we are. I don't have a perfect answer right now. The answer I have is that we as a company are currently undergoing a very kind of detailed evaluation of how we can use large language models, and there are multiple challenges here because we have different parts of the company that would need different services from a language model. And I think the question for us is, can we use one language model that would fit be suitable for everyone, or do we have to train multiple models? And then there is the inevitable question, can we use public models like the GPT-3, 4 Google models, or do we have to have an in-house model. We have experimented with some open source models in-house for a very limited number of use cases, and it's definitely, I would say, not like a proprietary trained model is definitely not sufficiently decent for anything meaningful. And I do see a question, I'm not sure who asked that, but at least did see it. If you're training a model in proprietary content, will it be sufficiently advanced for anything good? From our experience, it's probably not. And in my previous experiences before Disney, what we did is we used publicly available data and supplemented with our proprietary data and trained kind of an aggregate model on that in-house that provided us sufficient sufficient volume of training data at the same time as being able to keep a model in-house. So that's something we are considering as an option. And then there is a question of when we're using third-party TMS CAD tools with vendors who are probably using MT under the hood. If they are using MT and they're using GPT for machine translating our content, does that mean that our content is out there in the public training set somewhere? So that's something we are evaluating. How can we make our vendors, platform vendors, translation vendors accountable for the data that we share? And well, no, I'm sorry, I'm not giving you an answer. I'm just sharing the challenges that we have, because I honestly don't think anyone knows the full set of answers to these questions right now. So it's a matter of collecting all the questions and considerations that the company would have when evaluating all these things.
Of course. And everything you brought up just now is something that we've ourselves been thinking about as well. And Adam brought up Azure, and that is one thing that is great about using GPT right now. They have a more kind of strict set of rules and strict set of concerns, security concerns, that is helping us a little bit in this area as well. So no, security concern is something to be very, very off. So Adam, would you like to add to Peter's point here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in Peter's camp as well. And for us, the first thing was raising awareness and educating employees and clients about data privacy and security and how those can be, a disadvantage to using internet-based large language models. Even for our experimentation, we didn't go out and just use ChatGPT as is. We decided until OpenAI was open to us, available to us, and we started doing experimentation there. I'm of the opinion that in my context, the security, is trumps the benefit of ChatGPT as it stands today. So, we'll do the experimentation on the class stuff and stuff that, we probably don't care a lot about going out. But we definitely are working on the framework and the usage policies. And, if like I said, if you listen to the news today, I believe Apple just banned their own employees from using ChatGPT publicly. So I think that may be coming down. I don't know for sure, but I do definitely see that there's a larger umbrella of concern around the usage of ChatGPT and other large language models. So I think when we talk about hosting your own or developing the network and infrastructure where you could take a generic open source model and augment it with your own data, that might be a very valid avenue for those of us who are concerned so much about security and data privacy.
Of course. We've kind of been trying to look into different large language models, not only GPT, because all of them have different kind of sets of rules when it comes to privacy. So we're currently looking for the best one and the most private and secure one to propose to our customers to use as well. So yeah, we're gonna keep you updated here too. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Peter. Ray, because you've been working with e-commerce, I'm not sure privacy would be and security would be your largest concern when it comes to using GPT. Could you tell us about your concerns here, your challenges you believe exist in working with GPT?
The main challenge for us at the moment that we've seen is lack of control or lack of confidence on the accuracy of the information. We've seen output where information is added that wasn't there to begin with. And sort of the famous hallucinations, although these are minor things like adding that a dress is perfect for a bridal party, where that's not really what we intended to add to this product. So the accuracy of the information is the main concern for us in our case that we tested. Having said that, though, I am waiting to see more regulation coming in to these language tools, especially in the European environment, which would be very relevant to our case because we operate in European markets.
Absolutely makes sense. That is very true. Ray, do you have something to add here because of the very similar way of working with GPT or wanting to work with GPT?
Yeah, definitely the accuracy and the presence of these hallucinations has been the greatest concern. Going back to the machine translation days, you know, you frequently see the error of like category replacement, that you know, units of measurement, that a yard will become a centimeter, or a certain color blue will become red, or in translation. So those sorts of things are extremely difficult in this sort of in commerce in that context, because again, this is a contract between the buyer and the seller. So that always has been our first concern, making sure that accuracy, and so GPT has its own set of problems around that, and that definitely is the biggest risk for us.
Understandably so. Understandably so. While we've been researching machine translation through GPT or post-editing through GPT, automated post-editing through GPT, we've noticed some hallucinations as well, and we're currently trying to kind of overcome this issue of being, I don't know, strict with prompts and stuff like this. But we're still researching. We're still looking into it. So everything's very new. Everything's very new. So all the points you made here today, they absolutely valid, and we're gonna go through it together, and we're gonna go looking into multilingual content generation and machine translation through GPT and source quality improvement and stuff like this. Very important for us, and hopefully it'll be useful for us in the near future. We can go through some of the questions that we've gotten recently. And one of them, I think, is good for Berg. How long do you think it will be for multi-target native language content generation to become commonplace? Because it's kind of very, very new.
Not long at all. It's already happening, I believe. The only but here is that you still need a reliable source, and you need to prompt in a language, right? So I'm not sure, but I don't think prompting in just any language is as effective as English. But
that is actually, yeah, that is a very interesting point, because with when working with machine translation and trying to prompt it to translate into a language, we've tried both prompting it in a source language and in target language. Honestly, we have gotten pretty similar results, but I think English was kind of easier to work with. It was easier for us to work with, and it was easier for GPT to generate text from. So that is definitely a very good point. That is a very interesting thing to research. All right, thank you, Berg. We've also talked about, when we talked about the challenges of using GPT, we've gone through GPT hallucinations, or kind of weird out of place generations that GPT sometimes provides, or any large language model can provide. Can you provide any examples of hallucinations, and can you kind of suggest how they can be avoided in your area of expertise?
Sorry, is that for me?
If you'd like to answer this, that would be great.
Yeah, the best example that I had is the one I already shared, where if the information you input includes formal or semi-formal, you might see a dress recommended for a wedding in the output, and that might not be the occasion that the dress is for. So there's just subtle differences and subtle pieces of information that you need to control. So there's a learning process, and either fine-tuning your prompting or fine-tuning the model if you're able to do that, so that it doesn't throw new information that you don't want on.
Yes, definitely. Thanks so much, Bea. And I think we have time for one more question. Let's see. Oh, that is a good one. Along with all the technical advances that we've discussed today that are resulting from GPT, how do you think translation memory systems can evolve to accommodate those changes? How can they accommodate new tasks, such as multilingual content generation or source quality improvement? Would anybody like to go on this question? Ray, how do you feel about it?
Sure. I mean, I think ever since MT, research began, I'm old enough that I'm probably closer to that time than a lot of people on this call. One of the promises has been this idea of leveraging the humans, so human-aided translation, and with the generative AI, like, are we closer to an actual interactive system that would work intelligently and more reliably than anything that really we've been able to do? Sort of prompting for clarification, like, has never been good. And so, if generative AI cannot give us perfect accuracy in the outputs, could one strength of it, i.e. the natural interactions that it supports so well, is that something that could be leveraged to create the human in the loop in a much more profitable way than we've been able to do before? That's a question I have.
Yeah, that is actually a good point here. Adam, would you like to add something here?
Maybe a little. I mean, one thing we thought of, and we may be off the track here, but we have transition memories. Some are maintained, some are not so well maintained. So one thing we'd like to try is, if we ran a analysis of these old transition memories through ChatGPT and do some quality estimation, maybe improve the source, will we have better transition memories? That's a good question. And perhaps you have transition memories with different sentiments and different type of quality assessment and qualitative measures that are attached to transition memories. So it's a good question. It's something we're investigating. Maybe the industry has more insights about that, but it's definitely like an interesting thing to try out.
Yes, definitely. And hopefully that is something that is going to be used in the near future, because with the popularization of large language models, it is something to be looked into by the translation memory providers. All right, perfect. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for this amazing panel. And I'm gonna ask you to go through some of the questions that are in the Q&A. And if you'd like to answer some after the panel is done, please go ahead, and I can give the word back to Mark.
Great. Thank you very much, Daria and panelists. That was super interesting. I think we've all learned a lot from the panels today. So yeah, thank you all again. And I'm going to ask Konstantin to come back on stage. I believe Konstantin has a special guest that's going to talk to us a bit about GPT buzzword bingo.
Yeah, so we actually got the first bingo card from Chalmers Fitzpatrick. Thank you, but we need more. And we understand that that's why we dried up all all panels, there's no water. So we took all this water and we asked GPT to tell about its role in localization, using almost only the buzzwords on the list. Let me invite this person on stage. Yes, thank you. And let's see. Do you see them? Good. I hope you also hear.
The rise of AI, often referred to as AI is the new electricity, has brought a paradigm shift in localization, ushering in a revolution, not evolution. This groundbreaking, disruptive technology exploits big data, unlocking a synergy that stimulates exponential growth. With AI-driven strategies, GPT has made a quantum leap in translation, like magic. Machine learning on steroids enables GPT to bridge cultures by democratizing language access, marking a revolutionary step in automating tasks. It reduces turnaround time and enhances accuracy, resulting in immense cost savings. The tool's exponential growth and immense potential promise a revolutionary future in localization, disrupting the traditional process and unleashing potential like never before. However, GPT doesn't replace humans. While it may lead to job cuts, the human touch remains irreplaceable, and its primary role is to make people more productive by automating mundane tasks. The synergy of machine translation and human intuition leads to groundbreaking results. Thus, GPT is a paradigm shift, a disruptive technology that is revolutionizing localization, making it faster, more accurate, and more accessible.
Thank you. So almost no humans were involved in producing this content, apart from dragging, copy and pasting. I hope that gives enough inputs for the bingo cards. So please do send. We need more. Thank you, Mark.
Awesome. Thanks, Konstantin. And yeah, great visitor there. Super interesting. So taking a cue from Konstantin, I completely agree that, rather than looking at machine translation in recent years as a false summit where you get to the summit and you're like, oh my gosh, there's still this massive mountain in the distance I have to get to. Getting to Everest Base Camp is incredibly hard. And I know that we in localization for years have worked incredibly hard mastering machine translation. And maybe it really is like we've made it to base camp, and now we've got to scale Everest. We've got to scale GPT. We've got to scale large language models. So I like that analogy, Konstantin. Thank you. So, awesome. It seems like we've really packed a lot of GPT learning into 2 hours. I hope you all enjoyed it. And for those of you who asked questions that weren't answered live by the panelists, we'll be responding to those via email. And first and foremost, I wanted to say thank you again to our panelists. If you could all join me on the screen, please. So I think one of the things that, one of the things that I really love most about the localization community is how much time and effort we all spend sharing information and knowledge. I mean, we just had hundreds of people spending a couple hours together in the middle of a really busy business day, helping one another, sharing information. It's a really terrific community to be a part of, and you guys are what make it so special. So thank you so much. We can't wait to do it again and have you join us again. To the audience, thank you for joining us. I hope you came away with some good, useful ideas and insights. And we're always happy to set individual discussions with you about all things machine translation and to explore using GPT for your own use cases of highest interest. So we would love to hear from you directly. With that, thank you all again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you.